expand the people here to see who's nodding their head, who's already worked with them. So who of you have already worked with the Bayo String Quartet?
Most of them have their mini
Oh,
pieces.
awesome. So awesome. So was your experience positive? So my experience with them was that they took all that I had documented and they took that seriously. And they recognized that I had documented what I meant. And they interpreted that then as best they could, but then they also brought their own interpretation to that. And yesterday, they played a very beautiful rendition of the movement that they're playing of my latest string quartet. But it wasn't what I wanted, it wasn't what I heard, but it was still beautiful. It was still a really nice interpretation. So we talked about that. And they are really unique in that way that they are open to trying different interpretations, and they did another interpretation of my piece in that same rehearsal. And it was closer to what I was thinking. And then their next interpretation may be even closer to what I hear in my head after we talk. But they are consummate professionals and very thoughtful musicians. So let's start with, and it's really wonderful to work with an ensemble who you trust that much, that even if they're not performing exactly what's in your head, they may be coming up with something that's even more expressive and interesting. And that's really the point of collaboration for me. And we'll talk about collaboration in a little bit. So this is a piece for amplified string quartet and projected video. And it's a fusion of styles where I really want to, and I encourage my students to compose music that is still concert music. And I changed the title of this talk to concert music instead of classical music because classical music is so loaded and it's really hard to use terms that aren't. But I want to use the craft of traditional concert music that we all appreciate from those that we've studied in music history. And I want to marry that with the intensity and the expression, and in this case, the bravado of music that I listen to. So this was a fusion of that kind of crafting of a string quartet that I have learned from studying Beethoven is my favorite string quartets, and having played them and studied them. But I also want to meld that with bravado and the spectacle of metal and electronica shows. And so when you go to a Amon Tobin show or you go to a Flying Lotus show, there is a presentation of the material that goes beyond just listening, that adds to the music. And that's what this piece is about. So this is for interactive computer music and interactive video. And I collaborated with Zach Dewar, who's a video artist here at Virginia Tech, who I collaborate with often. We are on our fourth or fifth project together. And I find the collaboration leads me to different conclusions in the same way that working with the Bayo String Quartet and being open to their interpretation leads me to different conclusions or different possibilities. Collaborating with other artists, especially artists of different disciplines, can help open up possibilities for your work. The first thing I want to show for this piece is this treatment that we just finished. This is a spatial audio and immersive video version of this piece. Can you all see my YouTube screen? So this is, because of the pandemic, we decided to turn this project, which is a couple years now, maybe 3 years old, since we can't rehearse in person, since the Bayo weren't performing live. They had scheduled this piece for 6 performances this spring, and they performed 2 of them before the pandemic and then weren't able to perform the rest. So we were wondering, what could we do to promote this collaboration and we decided to turn it into this virtual performance where you can move around and hear the audio move and see the video move. So I'll just play a little bit of this because you won't get the immersive audio in the Zoom. So that's that version, and I invite you all to check it out in a system where you can hear the spatial audio. But here's a live version of the third movement. All right, so that, can you hear me again? So that is a good representation of where I am now in this process. Um, and I'd be really interested, I'm going to stop sharing and look at people. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about that. Unfiltered thoughts. We're all composers. It's a safe space. Everybody can, you know, really let me know what you think. Who's the first to speak? Oh, somebody can't unmute. People can't unmute.
Okay, we can now. No, I really thank you, by the way, unmuting me. Um, I really felt the influence of everybody that you had put, like especially with King Crimson and Tool. And I'm just curious as to, you had kind of that palm muting effect go on, and the mix that you had sounded exactly like the palm muting of Adam Jones and Tool. And I was just wondering if that was like, did you do anything? Did you tell anything specific to Bayo to do that?
Um, no, that was a combination of their interpretation and the effects processing that I had set up. So I'd asked them to record before this so that I could load their recordings into the Max Patch, play it through the guitar rig effects processing, tune the amps to that recording, tune the distortion and the flanging and the phasing and all that delicious processing, but then tune it again for the hall. So we spent quite a bit of time on the sound, and that's something that I wasn't doing before. I really wasn't approaching processing instruments in computer music the way that I do in the band that I'm in, and that was really to the detriment of the music, that you really need to care about the processing as much as you care about, for instance, the quality of the instrument that they're playing, whether they're playing a very good violin or a different, you know, a modern German violin, which is what I play, versus the Degani that Charlie Castleman let me use all through college. Is like, oh my God, this is a completely different instrument. And it's the same thing with effects processing. So I hope that answers your original
Yeah,
question.
no, yeah,
But I,
Could I ask a question?
yes, who's that?
Yeah,
Sure.
no, I wanted to. Thanks for sharing, by the way, and it's great. I also do data sonification, auditory display, so it's really cool. Some kindred spirit in the room there. But I was gonna ask, I guess like aesthetically, in the video, but I also think that analogous things happened in the music. It took very long to actually like enter the object to like explore like that object that we were looking at. I was wondering like aesthetically, what is that about for you, right? Like I found myself wanting to be there sooner and never being there. So,
That's an interesting question. And that's not the topic of this presentation at all, but that is also something that I wrestle with in my music, where I very much like, so the very first piece that I did with Bayo, which was at the Charlotte New Music Festival, my first year, whichever year that was, is this piece called At the Boundary. And more, and, and especially then, more of my pieces were about accumulating and eventually getting there or not quite getting there. And then other pieces were about interrupting and, trying to accumulate and then getting interrupted and getting into something else and then getting interrupted. And I don't know the answer to that question. It's just an intuitive thing that I enjoy. It is not the kind of music to write if you want to get into a festival or a conference, because they are not going to get past the first minute. But it's what I'm interested in. So coincidentally, that's also what happened with the video. We work very closely, but we also work in parallel. So we'll talk about initial ideas, go off and work, come back together, critique, go back and work, and really influence each other that way. But at no point did either one of us talk about, well, we really want this to be about taking a long time to get to a place. I think we just both settled there. Um, you didn't see the full piece, but the very beginning, the first movement, you're in that orb. The second movement, you're in the landscape um, where the lighthouse lives with the water, and it's emitting the smoke, and you're going through the times of day. And then the third movement, turns out that lighthouse is really a spaceship, and it goes back to the orb where you started. So that's kind of this overall arc. Hopefully you all noticed that the audio was attached to the video, so each instrument was controlling different aspects of the translucence or the quality of one of the elements of the video. But I'm also interested in your reaction to this kind of synthesis or fusion. If you think it's effective, if you think it's derivative, if you think it's authentic. Justin?
Yeah, so might sound a little bit crazy, but so my first thought of while watching this was like, has he ever thought about actually like putting like an actual fog machine when having that like house or something? Because full disclaimers, I've seen Roger Waters from Pink Floyd live, so like I have seen like the whole like light show and everything that they used to do. So yeah.
Yes, the answer is yes, and that's the end of the presentation, is this piece that I did here called Bad Star. Bad Star was a collaboration, I'll just preview it, was a collaboration between three composers, one who is a drone metal guitarist in a drone metal band that's got a successful German career. One is an electric banjoist who does a lot of old-time music, but also a lot of noise music, and me on electric violin, who I identify more as being a fusion or prog violinist. And we co-wrote this hour-long show in the Cube and with this same video artist, and we worked with an architect to make the architecture, which is hung cloth, for the video projection, and it cost $35,000. So, I mean, that's really the point, is that I had to apply for this grant as a PI, as a primary investigator, get $35,000 because this stuff costs money. The fog machine didn't cost anything. We had that on hand. The facilities let us use their fog, but paying the people to build the architecture. And even if you look at the architecture, it's nowhere near what Pink Floyd uses. It just costs money. And we've done that show, we performed the show 3 times fully for an audience, 3 times each section, like 1 section each for morning session groups. And then we ran through it a couple of times. But we haven't been able to perform it anywhere else because we have to write another grant to be able to transport that and set it up in another facility. But I'll show pictures of that later on. Aside from the spectacle, any comments about the music as far as whether it seemed authentic or derivative or...
I mean, if you wanted commentary on like the synthesis, I'd say that the how do I say? Sorry, words. That I don't think that you intended for the translation between the sound and like and the way that it affected the visual to be very clear. Like, I don't think that you intended to be like, this will do this. So like, I didn't really view it as any kind of like auditory display of what was happening on the stage. So I found it difficult to make the connection. But I realized that they were interrelated, but I wasn't sure how much of that is because we do kind of similar work. Like, is that kind of what you're after? Or?
Well, we weren't really wanting it to be like, I do this and now you see this. Like, I play a note and a laser comes at you. But we wanted it to be a clear relationship between the audio and the video. And so you see pulsing happening, and it's not constant. It's not, if you're talking about it in terms of film scoring, we weren't Mickey Mousing. Right. There was a clear correlation.
Yeah.
Mike,
And do you manage that? I mean, do you manage that in Max by like switching
Yes.
which parameters are controlled? So like sometimes the volume of an instrument will affect this, other times it'll affect that, or is it?
No, I sent him streams of data of the amplitudes of each instrument, and then the programming that he had in Unity, I think it was, he could change where that amplitude was going in the.
So he was managing the. That's really interesting.
Right.
Like because like me, not to talk too much. Me, as a composer, I want that. I want control over where that goes. So it's really interesting to me that you were like able and willing to give that up. You know.
Absolutely, and it again goes to collaborating with artists that you trust and that you value their perspective.
That's so interesting because it's just like that visual becomes like an extension of the sound at that point, and that's got to be hard to like negotiate. So like how did that happen in conversation where you kind of negotiated where the lines are there? You know.
It happened over the course of, this was our third collaboration, so really getting to know him as an artist and working together on the development of a common style. And the style changed from, so he was the artist in that picture that I showed of the surround video and the dancers and me and the violin in the upper part. The style has evolved as we've worked together. Mike, you were about to say something?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking as trying to, as I'm watching this performance and trying to evaluate it either by my own criteria or some of the things that you're pitching to us. I get one of my thoughts too is just that it feels and part of it is probably because I'm not super familiar with this kind of music that you're working in. It's not quite what I compose with, but I also think that I think it can maybe be a little difficult to evaluate a lot of the music that we're seeing being written today, just because it feels like a lot of it is more focused on the individual, right? I mean, I get the impression that you're writing this because it's just what you want to do. It's it's really what the kind of music that really appeals to you. And so I don't know if anyone else maybe feels this way, but it does feel a little difficult to evaluate that, because it's like, well, if you're just writing this because it's really what speaks to you, what is there to evaluate, right? And because I mean, maybe we can look at, oh, well, there's some influence of Beethoven here, or some of the the fusion groups that you listed earlier, but I mean, it's maybe influenced by them, but I would never put what we've seen in the same category as Beethoven. So
Right.
I think this kind of music presents I don't know, just some interesting questions about how to evaluate new territory, and I personally don't feel like I have really the tools to do that right now. So as I'm kind of watching this, I'm like, man, I don't know how I don't even know how to like position this or really, and I mean,
But that's
I feel a little odd saying this after Karen just talked, because she seems very
Where's Karen?
knowledgeable. So I'm kind of like, oh, maybe it's really just me. Anyway, yeah. So that's just kind of what's going through my head as I'm watching this.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and I would respond that I'm really not looking for you to respond in a historically informed perspective. I'm really asking if it resonates for you, and because yes, I'm writing this because it interests me, but I'm more and more wanting to come to a way of resonating with people, with more people, instead of writing for the intelligentsia who are going to be able to hear that I have fulfilled my aggregate set. I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm really wanting it to be intellectually interesting and viscerally engaging. Those are my two criteria now. And I'm trying to become more and more distilled in that.
Hi.
Cool. Thank you.
So Lansing, I just read your chat that you're down the hall from Charlie.
Oh yeah. I see him like all the time.
He was just here. He was just at Virginia Tech. I just wrote him another string quartet for his visit that he performed.
Oh, great, super. Yeah, I also run into him on the road because we're both cyclists.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you said, I'm not in, this business about, intelligentsia and stuff like that. The thing is, for those of us who are old enough to know all that stuff, this was very reminiscent of Lark's Tongue and King Crimson from a specific era. I would say 73 to 83. Lark's Tongue through Discipline, Three of a Perfect Pair,
I love that.
which I think is their best decade. But one of the criticisms that was aimed at King Crimson at that period was precisely that it's music for intelligentsia.
Right.
Oh, it's all like art. Of course, 40 years ago we called it art rock. We didn't call it prog. That wasn't the name at the time. We called it art rock.
Right.
And really, before I even discovered Berio or Boulez or even Stravinsky and Bartok, I was into that stuff. And when I first heard Ligeti and Lutoslawski, I was like, oh wait, this is just art rock except in the concert hall. Great. Right. So I don't know, and this is just me personally, but I love that stuff. It was, I think, specifically, it was not, accidentally. Fripp and all those guys, even in Yes, and they really were aiming to be intellectually challenging or what have you, and aiming at not just a, let's see how many, appealing to the general audience. So it's funny that aesthetic then, taken out of the pop context and put into the concert hall, the classical music, is, well, now I want to appeal to more people, when it's really an aesthetic that was actually not designed to appeal to more people within that context. So changing the context 40 and 50, and that is 40 and 50 years ago, changing the context and not changing the language, actually then what? Then I don't even know what I'm really asking, except for then it does change, in a way it does change the language, because, not because of the language, because of the context.
It's interesting that you are talking about, and somebody else was talking about, King Crimson 1973. And that is totally, and Beat and Three of a Perfect Pair and Red are my wheelhouse. That's when I got to know King Crimson, and that's when I got to love King Crimson. But in fact, that movement was specifically influenced by Tool, not by old King Crimson. And
of course, Tool was influenced by King Crimson.
And that's it. And that's a beautiful thing. But
there would be no Tool if not for King Crimson.
Right. Absolutely. And when you listen to Meshuggah, I'm getting off track here, but when you listen to Meshuggah couldn't happen without Alan Holdsworth. But I doubt that many Meshuggah fans know who Alan Holdsworth is. But I think I'm presenting my question unclearly. So I am trying to be honest to my ear and to my heart and my brain, and really to distill that more and more and write music that is honoring all those influences, instead of trying to do something else that is inauthentic. And I'm wondering if it comes across as that. It would be like if I am listening to a lot of Chinese music and I'm writing music that's influenced by Chinese music. Is that going to be misunderstood as appropriation?
Oh, I have something on that kind of, not in terms of appropriation per se, but I was thinking, in terms of intellectual versus visceral, in terms of the thought of music. And I've been, as a composer and individual, trying to use the feedback of phones and playback of phones and other things like that as a kind of facet of music making, especially since we're distant and now we're thinking about microphones. And one could intellectually surmise that I was subliminally influenced by Reich's process music and other things of that kind of, having an altered playback of some sort by technological means. But really, I was just viscerally entertained by the notion and kind of socially interested because of the advent of social media, a perspective that's very much in a generational bubble. And because of that, I'm focusing on the visceral, I'm focusing on the social framings in which I'm viewing my own art, as opposed to trying to intellectually tie it in with something else that's historical. I can make kind of intellectual assumptions on my own merit of what I could do and how influences can shape that. But I think a lot of failures in innovation come from aspiring for a consequence instead of aspiring, because a consequence is a control and is out of your control. It's controlled by people's reception, something that will never be constant. So if you're aspiring to be like a Reich or Glass, or aspiring to reach, or all of those things are just consequences at the end of the day. And so if you're honest with yourself and are kind of intellectually driven to satisfy your own understanding, that's all you can do. All you can do as an artist is offer the world yourself and enrich your perspective on your surroundings, informed by history and informed by the present to make the best kind of decisions. And that's kind of how this music read, because one of my favorite things that happened over the summer is I started following a YouTube channel called Xsurf Xspec. I can link it below. It shares a bunch of Japanese retro albums from the 60s to 70s. And in one of those albums, it opened with an electronic mix of Daphnis and Chloe. And I found that incredible because it took the textures and just translated it in a completely different medium, but the idiomatic language had this similarity, and it was cool, and it made me think about how you can't separate your surroundings from your current music making either. And in terms of electronic synthesis coming from Tool and a generation that I, as a 22-year-old, have had no direct access to, that will inspire you and inform you subliminally because it's always been there. Like, I can definitely trace back, like, oh, I've dropped this, hit in my music. And it's like, yeah, because I remember playing a video game when I was 6 and hearing a soundtrack like that. I'm kind of spurred by my own childhood fascinations for genres.
But here's a question for you, Ian. How important do you think it is for you to be able to identify those influences as you go? Or is it more just the Vita mix of grinding it up and digesting it?
I think, honestly, it depends on the person, because it's a similar concept to kind of meditation and inward thinking in general, how some people will become overly anxious trying to compartmentalize and be aware of everything that they're doing. But, for some, that working with those constraints and limitations of knowing where you're at help fuel forward thinking. Like, I'm one of those type of people that will write in documents and take notes and just do things because I find a lot of clarity in doing so in every moment, even when I'm struggling. But some people work really well with the model of just go off of instinct until I can't anymore, and then completely remove myself from the situation, reflect, and then kind of with that understanding go again.
I really like your analogy to meditation and the process of becoming comfortable with meditation, because I think I know for me, composition is meditation, is a meditation spiritual practice. I really like that analogy, and I really like this conversation. I hope more people start engaging in this conversation, and let's go. There's a lot going on in the chat. I can't keep up with the chat. But let me do some more of my work, and let's keep that conversation going based on on the thread of my work. All right, sharing the screen again. All right, so it started with this piece where I decided that I wanted to mix Stevie Ray Vaughan with what I had learned from Bach sonatas and partitas. And considering the time, I won't play this. But this was, I think, a pretty good start to that process. It led to this concerto where I wanted to explore the influences of Paganini, Hendrix, and Coltrane in three different movements. The middle movement is what I have linked here, but I don't think I'll play that either. And it was really about creating an atmosphere of each of these artists and using each artist as a point of departure to explore the virtuosity translated to viola. And virtuosity is something that I really want in my music. Then it later showed up with this piece for Load Bang, and this piece was more about math rock and again technical metal, but wanting to translate that into this ensemble. And again, I think we're already through an hour, so I think I'll move on and play this piece. So this was 2 years ago, and this is a different type of aesthetic than that more technical metal aesthetic. And let me just play this, and then we can discuss.
You're loading this up. Do you have links to those other pieces? Because you mentioned them, and it's like, I have this chocolate or this chocolate
I'm
or
sorry.
this pizza. And
Yes, I will. Well, everything is on. Let me find you all again. There you go.
I'd actually ask if just we could have the PowerPoint in our files. I'd ask Elizabeth if that can happen.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
By the way, Charles, most of the links, the YouTube links that you gave are either dead videos or videos blocked, or so those.
Well, what?
You gave a whole list of YouTube links,
Oh,
and many of those are dead or blocked or video unavailable, copyright infringement, blah, blah, blah.
these are what you're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll go back and check those then. Yes, so all of these videos of my work should be current and not broken, and they're all on my YouTube channel. So Brooks, that's where you could get that box of chocolates.
thank you.
All right. that allowed me to catch up on the chat. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you for your claps. So it's interesting, Elizabeth, that the discussion is more lively virtual than it was live. The discussion being between people in the chat, and also this discussion that we're having face to face to face to face
Totally.
seems more lively.
Totally. It's quite enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay, thoughts about that in comparison to what we've been talking about?
I think it's really interesting to hear all these pieces, and I'm wondering, you know, I feel it would be very interested if you have not told us at the very first beginning about like all these fusion stuff.
Okay.
And you know, like how would we listen to it? You know,
That's a great,
because
great
that
question.
is a very, very, you know, like what is fusion? You know, is it the composition process that you are intentionally doing it, or you know, which is which is a little bit different from your like subliminal, you know, your subliminal inspiration,
Right.
that you know you unconsciously have done it without realizing it sometimes, and you know, how does that affect the sound? I think is a very core question, and I think I have no answers, but
Well,
I'm just wondering that.
it's a great question, and it goes back to what Ian was talking about. And what I'm asking is, how important is it to, as you are composing, to realize why it is you're writing what you're writing? Is that important? So, Alvin, what would the experience have been for you if I hadn't titled this topic, and if I hadn't listed those influences? What would the experience have been for you?
Oh, wow. Oh, first of all, I haven't, you know, I don't really, I'm not sure, you know, 100%, but what I guess is, you know, I think audience all come from different stuff. Like they have different musical tastes and different backgrounds. So if you are not directing them that this is a pop fusion, then they are probably going to listen it as a piece of concert music that they would think it in different ways. Perhaps I am interested in timbres, and perhaps I would listen to more of that perspective. Perhaps, oh, that's an interesting timbre or stuff. And you know, there are programs, even if it's not for, you know, pop fusion, it's just like just a normal concert. Like people listen to, you know, perhaps Beethoven, and they have different opinion, right? Some people would think it's so boring because it's so long. So I guess, you know, it's also related to the questions of when you're referring to you want it to resonate with more listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Because who are the listeners? Because they all have very different, you know, backgrounds, and to me it's almost impossible to expect, like, as a composer, how would they react or would they resonate?
Well, that's a interesting perspective from the other side of where I'm asking the question. So I'm really asking the question. I'm asking, and I wish I don't see the students that I had on Monday, but I asked the students I had on Monday to tell me if they thought I was doing what I was asking them to do. And that's really what I am asking is, does this resonate with you as authentic, or does it resonate with you as somebody outside of a culture trying to comment on the culture?
I had lessons with you on the last week, and you asked. I'm sorry, I don't have my camera up because I use my phone
Trevor.
as my camera.
Okay,
And
Trevor, great.
yeah, I use my phone as my it's like very low battery right now, so I have to charge it again. But I was gonna say, to me, this feels like you committed to that decision. I have the same problem with involving maybe punk rock or math rock and garage and stuff in my music, and we talked about that a little bit. And when you made the comment towards the beginning of the lecture about kind of shifting away from the intelligentsia and not worrying about that, but wanting to write music that you just feels authentic, I think I've kind of heard that comment from a bunch of people, but the way you've reached it feels a little bit different and something I can relate to more, that is possible for me if I commit to that as well. To me, it feels very authentic because you're not concerned about having those influences show through a lot. And I think that's the big difference, because I'm trying to think of certain formulas and ways to kind of incorporate different maybe some garage music, but this really has some DNA of it on the surface. And committing to that because you enjoy it, I think, is a really big step in that direction and something that I could learn from. So to me, it does feel authentic because the DNA is on the surface.
Great, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're here, Trevor. And
I had you on Monday, and we didn't really talk about this, so I'm feeling bad.
We had a lot to talk about.
Yeah, maybe I just talk too much.
No.
But we keep coming. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, folks. It's hard. It's so hard on the chat. You can't read body language.
But it looked like Hayden had something to say. And
yeah, go ahead.
Mine was a question, so if you just had a comment, Karen, then go ahead.
Well, I think I wanted to hop on the authenticity thing before we got onto something else, because I think a lot of what we talk about in the discourse around authenticity is like, what's at stake, right? Like in terms of authenticity. So like when you likened it to like kind of embracing like musical aspects of like that are produced in other cultures, like the kind of stakes are much like higher there, right? Because like if you're appropriating from like a culture in which like there could be unequal power dynamics involved, right? But I wanted to ask, like, you seem to be asking and like very concerned with this concept of authenticity, of like what's at stake if it's inauthentic. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I don't think I'm polling for political correctness or for let me start again. This is something I believe in. This is something that I have embraced and really am excited to explore. And as a group of educated, successful composers, I'm interested in your feedback of how you're receiving it. And because Ian and Trevor and Karen and Alvin can talk this language, I want to talk about this with you all and take this as an opportunity to ask these questions and get your feedback. Because, and here's another thing. We were talking about this in the beginning of the Max workshop. I teach because I want to learn, and I compose because it's a journey for me, and I want to talk with people about that journey and hear their response to that journey.
I don't know if Karen, you were about to say a rebuttal to that or anything.
I mean, there's no rebuttal. I don't quite understand, because like I wasn't gonna like jump on it at first, but the term authenticity seems to mean something very specific to you that it doesn't somewhat can't carry that connotation for me. So I mean, I was just kind of curious if you could like elaborate on that, because I mean it seems to be something with which you're rather concerned, but I don't want to stick too long on my stuff. I know there's like a lot of people.
Yeah, and if I might add, I think not all of us are as well versed in your influences, obviously, and all of us are as well acquainted with the sources of your musical inspiration as you are. So we might not have the basic knowledge that we feel like we need to really intelligently respond to your prompts. And I think that might be part of it.
I think we are, though, because we know those aesthetic choices he's making. in his music. We can all identify with that because it survives in the pop idiom. And we just keep coming back to, I asked this in the chat, and I didn't mean this as like a meme, but is Beethoven really the standard of authenticity? Because there's been like 4 or 5 times we've each mentioned Beethoven.
Well, and this is taking a direction that I'm not intending, and the chat is interesting. I'm not asking, so when I talk about resonance, I'm not asking if I sound like I am oh, somebody's typing. Hayden, could you mute? Thanks. I'm not asking if I can get the seal of approval of technical metal. I'm asking you all, as practitioners, if it's resonating with you as sounding, the only word that I keep coming up with is authentic, but if it's
Sincere?
sincere, that's a great word.
Can I say one more thing about what I feel
Sure.
about it? Because I do get the feeling of authenticity from it. And I think it's fine to use the word because of what Lansing said in the comment, how it can mean different things to different people. But I personally have the history of doing mental gymnastics with trying to include my influences, trying to cover them in certain discrete ways or trying to bring them out at certain times and wrestling with academia against that.
This is great. That's a great point, Trevor. And sincere is a great label. But Trevor, why do you feel that you need to cover it?
Well, this kind of it's part of how I've been trying to find my voice, and I find that attempting it so much and trying to come up with these different tools and ways of doing it has only given me more baggage against it. And so when I can see the DNA of your influences on the surface like this, because I know it's what you want to do and because you can hear it clearly, or even if I didn't know that this is what you wanted to do exactly, but I just heard it, it doesn't feel like it has that baggage with it, the way that sometimes my my music has kind of resulted in, that I've seen from myself. And yeah, so that authentic part of it can be different for everyone, I think. But this specific and very clear one that you're talking about, I think makes total sense to me, and I can feel it when I'm listening to it.
Thank you. And I appreciate what Hayden just texted about the difference between authenticity and sincerity. And I should stop using the word authentic, it sounds like, because I don't mean does it sound like authentic technical metal or authentic electronica or authentic alternative rock. I mean, does it sound like a unified artwork in itself? And so sincerity is maybe a better choice. Brooks. Okay, let's play another, let's go through a little bit more. So here's my band, Modality, and Modality has helped me with my process of trusting my instincts and not second guessing my instincts and not trying to validate my choices. And so this is electric violin, bass guitar, computer guitars, keyboards, drums, electronics, and video. And we rehearse every week over the internet from Butte and 2 home studios in Missoula to, now I'm in a different town, Pulaski. And this is some of the live shows that we've played, and this is us online. We played an electronic festival in Missoula. We've played telematically for the Art Museum. This was us in, I think this was in Columbus. And this was in Blacksburg in the Cube with improvisation dancers controlling the spatial audio in the Cube. This is how we have to document our work. This is again us online, streaming across 3 sites. And we document with text scores because the other 3 guys are not traditionally educated in music. They play by ear and they describe things in colorful terms. So we make structured improvisations with text, and I write musical material. let's go back to this one and let me play you a track live. There we go. A live track of us playing in the cube. And let's, for the sake of time, let's do another track. There's no video for this, but this was us. I gotta see y'all. We've been playing online. Thank you, Elvin. We've been playing online for 7 years now, out of necessity for us, because I moved from Montana right after joining the band. We'd been together for 9 months, and I moved here for this job. And we wanted to keep the band going, so we've been playing online. And so we're really well versed at dealing with the latency and dealing with the software to do that. Unfortunately, now that everybody's online, those pipelines have become really clogged with people who aren't respectful of the community. So it's been difficult to be online now that everybody is. But this is a track that we recorded live online. And I just want to play a little bit of that. So I'm sorry to have to skip through some things quickly. I really like this chat thing that's going on. That's really great. So what's been useful about the band is that they are, all three of them, former college radio program directors, and one of them now runs a low-powered station in Butte, a community access radio station in Butte, and they know so much music, and they know so much music that I don't know. And it's really become a meta fusion of all four of us bringing into this environment our influences, what we're excited about at the time, and exploring that musically. And again, to Ian's point, it's become my church. It's become my weekly communal spiritual activity where we'll get together, and the way we develop tracks is we just start playing. Somebody will just start with an idea, and we'll just start navigating and playing whatever comes to mind. And sometimes it clashes because we're experimenting with things at the same time. But we all listen so carefully to each other now after 8 years that the timing, even over the internet, the timing and the choices and the synchronicity is really magical and wonderful. And that track, even though it sounds like there are layers of violin that would be multi-tracked, that was just me using a looper. And that was just live, us playing whatever came to mind. And we decided in this time of pandemic where everybody's online, we just released this raw track as an example of what we do online. We're about to release our third album together called Megacycles. We're pressing it to vinyl, and we'll put it on Bandcamp. And we're excited about that, and we're developing our fourth LP. And along with this fusion of styles that has been promoted by being in the band in my own personal work, let me go back to sharing. This idea of doing structured improvisation has become much more a part of what I do. So this is one of the pictures that I showed earlier. There we go. So this was a piece in the cube with the video artist. I was doing the computer music that was based on fragments of violin, kind of old-time music that I composed as loops to accumulate into counterpoint. And then we worked with an observational poet who came to our rehearsals and wrote poetry about our work. And then she became a part of the piece, and I recorded her live and did some hocketing of her in this kind of assembled rap of her poetry, all of this in spatial audio. And then I recorded some mandolin playing some, again, fake old-time music that I had composed to assemble and glitch. This is a piece for laptop ensemble where everybody's playing Wiimotes and they're looping sound files of Fort Lee, New Jersey, at my friend's house, getting on the bus to go into the city, in the city, getting on the subway, going to the festival, and then coming back again. And so it's got this arc narrative that they loop and glitch and delay and process these sound files following a graphic notation score while this tap dancer dances on an amplified platform to give additional percussive elements to the piece. This is the video artist and electronic artist from my band and I in our duo, again, a structured improv. And this is a piece for iPhones, again, a structured improv based on game theory that I was talking about in the Max workshop. And then this is my latest, well, next to the last structured improv that I did for William Lang of Load Bang. He came to Virginia Tech. And I'd just like to play a little bit of that. Let's see what time it is. Yeah, I'd like to play a little bit of that. Yeah, that was super fun working with Will, and it's so great. I don't know if you've gotten to spend time with Will yet, but he's an amazing human being as well. Let me pull up the score for that. Okay, so this is, I think this is going to answer Brooks' question. Where's Brooks?
Right here. Yeah, I didn't mean that as a joke. It was a genuine, because I know it's like, is the computer smart or not?
No, the computer was not smart. So this is what the patch looks like for those of you who are patchers in Max. It's multiple possibilities of grabbing material and then processing them and then being able to mix them and then put them out through these trajectories that keep moving in this dome of speakers. So I don't think I'll take the time to launch that patch because it takes a while to launch and settle because there's so much going on in it to take memory. But this is looking down on the cube, and this is looking across the cube, and each of these points correspond to each of these tracks that are being recorded live. So those high pitches at first, I captured them in this, and this, and they were all timed according to the tempo that was going to come up later. Then they were delayed according to that same tempo. And
we're
then,
not seeing the screen real quick.
I'm sorry. I'm pointing and everything. Here we go. So here's the patch. Input going down into all of these parallel processes, each of these, capturing, delaying, pitch shifting. And so these are the first 4 high pitches that get captured and then pitch shifted later up and then back down. This is those 2 really low rumbly sounds that are captured and then tremoloed and then delayed and then pitch shifted. These are the glisses. And then these are the 3 contrapuntal, just like the old time music layered in the dance piece that I was talking about. They're captured and layered on top of each other. And then I select chunks of them to glitch. And in this piece, I don't glitch them down to actual glitch like I do in other pieces. These I wanted to keep in chunks of beats or measures so that they would all still hang together contrapuntally. This is the spatialization in the cube. This is looking down on the room, and this is looking across the room. And so this number 2, for instance, is this number 2 here, and it's just spinning around the top layer here like birds. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are just spinning around the top. The meows, which were supposed to be 4 of them, but I missed 3 of them. They cascade down and back up and are played forwards and backwards so that they are surrounding the audience. And those low rumbles pass through the audience through these huge woofers, so you really feel them coming through your body. We have these 2 double 15 woofers that are on either side of the room. It's notated the same way that I would notate for the band, these little ideas to play with in the times after they're captured, and then these looping motives that are captured the first time through, and then just text to say what to do with those in the computer, then musical material to improvise 14A, B, C, D, and starting at any of these points in the improvisation, which means that it's really is a structured improvisation. It's based on material that will fit with the material that's already been captured and played back and transposed with pitch shifting so that he's really playing with different versions of himself. And then again, capturing more of those, instead of the high pulses, they're now low pulses. Instead of the long sustains or high sustains, and then the glisses are in the middle again. and then another collection of motivically related material, but different from what's been captured before. And every time we did this, it was completely different, and it could have gone on for much longer than it did. Okay, so could somebody unmute and say, are you looking at the presentation again? Because I'm not looking at the...
Yeah, we're good.
Great, thank you. So what else has the band done for me? Well, I took a tune, really a head that I'd composed in high school for my jazz fusion trio, violin, synth, and drums. And I arranged it for Modality, and we might record it for the next album. But then I orchestrated for the jazz band, orchestrated for the jazz band at Virginia Tech and performed it at Washington Jefferson. And that was fun. And I don't think I would have been comfortable doing that otherwise, but I really like this track. So that was fun. And then here's the cube with the surround video, and you can see the speakers in the array. And this is the dance piece again, where I 3D printed these reflective rings for the motion capture system, so that you can see the result of what she did in the video, where she was uncovering the video with her motions, but also she's moving the sounds, two sounds, around the immersive speaker system that's, how many do we have? 60, I've forgotten for some reason. We have 60 on the bottom, 20, 20, and 20. 64 on the bottom, 64 on the bottom, 20, 20, and 20. And the 20 on the ceiling are a row of 14 and a circle of 14 and a circle of 6. So that really allows you to place sounds accurately in the space. I did this piece, Epimetheus GIF, for amplified bassoon and computer. This was inspired by technical metal and really fun. And Steve, I finally got to work with Steve after he and I have known each other since we were roommates in college at Eastman. I did this piece, Dense Space, with a architect faculty. This version was at the American History Museum in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian, and I think we had 30,000 come enjoy that. Now it's installed in a science museum in Roanoke, but it's, I'll just play a little piece of that. It's ambient synthesis, and the lighting projects through, I'll wait. So I'll answer some questions. So that is all synthesis, and the that you hear in the upper filters are space weather data that are controlling bandpass filters in the synthesis. So it's just streams of data sonification. The overtones are in the synthesis itself. The sweeping overtones are just a LFO. The other questions I will answer with this last slide. Yes, I do like, for this piece, which, let me just play. So this is Bad Star. This was the piece that I had to apply for the grant to create. This is the architecture that we finally constructed. I wanted architecture that was like tunnel spider webs that would surround each player and then come out into a mesh. But I also wanted to be like Sun O type of flying buttresses for like a droney metal concert. And then again, Zach performed live this projection mapping on this architecture, while Andre performed guitar up on this part of the catwalk. I performed here. We don't see Holland. Holland was over on this side. And then we had a drummer join on the floor and do some, everything again was in the cube and in those 134 channels of audio. We developed it over the internet because Andre is in upstate New York and Holland's in Alabama. And again, in parallel with the video development. And this is If It Behaves. Are you all seeing my screen?
No, we're back in the gallery.
Shoot.
We're good now.
So, sorry, you weren't seeing that last screen of my presentation. This is the last screen of my presentation here. So that's Bad Star, and this is Andre in his cockpit, and this is me in my cockpit, and this is Zach performing that projection mapping. And I really feel like we just got started with that project, and there's a lot more to explore, but it's so expensive. Like I was talking with somebody earlier, it's just so expensive to put on a production like that. But that's the one with the smoke machine. Whew. All right. We got 7 minutes. Questions?
I think there was a lot of interest in Dan's question in the chat.
Let me see it. Could somebody just repeat the question?
It says, could you speak about the process of funding these types of projects, grants, institutional collaboration, etc.?
Yeah, so I am fortunate to be at the Institute for Creativity, Arts, and Technology at Virginia Tech, which is, so I'm on faculty at the School of Performing Arts in the music department, and I'm a faculty affiliate at ICAT. And ICAT has funding for transdisciplinary projects, and they're very interested in the intersection between art, design, science. They're into SEED, so science, engineering, art, and design. So we have these SEED grants, these major SEED grants. That was the $35,000 that we got for Bad Star. I've been a part of another project which is sonifying traffic data and then improvising and pitch tracking improvised violin, oud, and qanun to control the traffic signals of the traffic that we're hearing. So it's this feedback loop of we listen to the traffic as it enters the intersections. We can hear pizzicati as cars enter the different intersections. They each get a different pitch. Each intersection gets a different pitch, and then it sustains as the cars build up. The sustain accumulates for each of those pitches. So then we play in response to that sonification in order to trigger the street lights that let the traffic through. We've only done this with simulations. We haven't done this with actual cars, but we're trying to, we're developing a project now where we can do it with pedestrians to see if it's really effective in real time, that musical improvisation in response to the system itself creates more harmonious traffic. Those kinds of projects, they take funding. And so I've been fortunate to be at an institution that supports that kind of transdisciplinary funding, and also to be in a place that has the cube and wants work generated in the cube.
Do you know of any other resources or grants that are things that most of us who aren't employed, who don't have that, I'm not trying to like say this is bad that you're part of this, but who don't have the resources that you do, like anything, anywhere we could start?
Yeah, outside of the institutions.
Yes. So yes and no. I would check out your art, well, not now, but in the near future, I would check out your state art institutions, your state art administrations, I guess they're called. Because when I was in Montana, I was in a similar boat. I was teaching at the University of Montana, but we had no money for anything. And so everything was DIY. I hosted the Mountain Computer Music Festival every year. We would maybe have $500 to bring somebody in. And so I would get my colleagues from around the country to come in and to perform their works alongside student works. But I would schlep the lights from the theater department to the amphitheater myself at the base of this mountain, and the students and I would set up the sound system ourselves, and everything was DIY there. But we were able to do interesting projects, even projection mapping projects, with PVC pipes and cloth stretched between PVC, like you do for a techno show. And I would also recommend that you align yourself with whoever is doing interesting work in your area and really collaborate with them. So we were able to collaborate with the different arts festivals, electronica festivals, and they were interested in, they were surprised that we were interested in working with them because they thought we were academic and wouldn't think much of what they're doing, when in fact we were excited to be a part of their festivals that were bringing people to the music. So collaborate with regional partners. So my mission statement is always to make art locally to present globally. And I just happen to now be in a good place where there's solid funding for the arts from the sciences. I also did a piece, I should say, find scientists who have National Science Foundation grants, the NSF. Okay, here's a couple ideas. So I did a project with a scientist who had an NSF grant, and there's money specifically for musicians translating science into art, or artists into art, in my case musicians into music. So I was able to hire a dancer and another visual artist in Montana, and it was $16,000, but it was still enough for us to develop an interesting piece based on this river data that the scientists had collected. And we presented that 3 or 4 times with projection mapping on a dancer in a skirt. That's on my YouTube channel also. And then I just did a series of short pieces, and we're going to do a concert in the spring funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, because I partnered with Clark Grant, who has the radio station that is doing an oral history project of Butte, and they wanted to commission me to write music for the podcasts, and then we turned it into this larger project of string quartet with interspersed oral histories and recordings of a local harmonica musician who just died. So I've incorporated his recordings, his field recordings of harmonica, into the piece. So I don't think, just because I'm at an institution that supports this kind of work, I didn't get a grant this year. I don't expect to get another grant for a long time, so I have to look for other sources.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Elizabeth would be the one, I know we're out of time, but Elizabeth would be the one to answer how she has built this festival from scratch with collaborating with partners in Charlotte. So the radio station and all the partners that are listed on the webpage right now. So thank you all. That was fun for me. I hope it was for you. I wish we could go out for sandwiches and Indian food and talk more, but
Indian food.
but another time.
Thank you so much, Charles. This was incredibly interesting and relevant.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you all.
Super useful information and very cool ideas. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience and beautiful art with us.
Thank you, Elizabeth. See you all later.
All right, guys. Well, have a good afternoon, rest of your afternoon here. See you soon. Bye-bye.